Ladies and gentlemen, people of all gender expressions, thank you for checking out the North Bank Media Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Strevens. Joining me on the show this evening, a real honor and a privilege, it was Mr. James Marsh. Mr. Marsh, his autobiography or his memoir, Know-It-All, Finding the Impossible Country, will be available in print and audio form in April of next year. It chronicles a life from an abusive and troubling childhood to becoming and holding what some called the best job in the country at one time. That job was editor-in-chief of the Canadian Encyclopedia from its inception in 1980 until his retirement in 2013. In that time, they published 3 print volumes and then went online as the digital revolution took hold. The Canadian Encyclopedia is perhaps the forgotten chapter in Edmonton's history. It was published under Hertig Publishers, run by Mel Hertig, the late great Mel Hertig, with James, of course, as editor-in-chief. The encyclopedia was compiled and produced right in Edmonton, near the University of Alberta. And, of course, Peter Lougheed was a huge part in getting that funding, as well as Mel Hertig. James is an incredibly intelligent and wise man. I had the privilege to sit with him this evening for almost 2 hours to touch on the creation of the encyclopedia and why such a thing is important, why it was important then, and why it still is important now, especially with values of editorial authority and getting the facts right from the experts. Those are very important to him in a time when everybody has a voice and everybody's voice is weighted equally on certain platforms, for better or worse. So again, really enjoyed this one. It's a privilege. James was awarded the Order of Canada at one time. So he, really just a great Canadian, a man who by all accounts held up a mirror for the nation in the creation of the encyclopedia. So please enjoy this conversation with Mr. James Marsh. Alrighty. Thank you, James, for having me into your home and for your willingness to sit and chat for a bit.
You're welcome. It's really exciting.
So, a long career, a long list of things we could talk about, but maybe.
Are you saying I'm old?
I wasn't saying that. No,
Okay.
Distinguished. How about?
I like it. Yeah.
But maybe let's go for the memoir. Your memoir is soon to go to press, or where are we at with that?
It's scheduled to go to press next month.
Okay.
In fact, in Winnipeg, and to be published in May.
May. Okay.
Mid-May. Yeah.
And the name is?
The memoir is called Know-It-All.
Okay.
Finding the Impossible Country.
Okay. Nice. That's a cool name. Was that you were called a know-it-all as a young guy? Is that...
You got that. It's meant to be a little ironic. My mother used to chastise me for being a know-it-all.
Okay.
And I think that it's kind of coincidental that I grew up to make an encyclopedia.
No kidding.
So I don't know if people are going to see that when they first look at the title, but
Right.
that's the story behind it.
Very cool. So when did it occur to you to write a memoir?
I was about 10 years ago
Okay.
in a seminar with a very well-known Canadian writer named Denise Chong.
Okay.
And she had written a famous book called Concubine's Children, which was a memoir. And she told us all in this group, everybody should write about their family. And that got me going. And I started working on it, and it became a project of mine. And it's gone through various phases. It's gone from being a project to being something that I thought maybe could be published.
Okay.
And then I had to distance myself from it for a while, because once you become self-conscious about what you're doing, I'm not sure that you can maintain the voice. But I kind of, once I retired about 7 years ago, I started really working on it. And I have memories because I had a trauma when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
So I have memories of being very young. A lot of people don't remember that far back. So I'm very conscious of that, and I wanted to explore that. And I'm very interested in memory, and what it is, how it relates to reality. So a lot of what I've written about has that angle to it.
Very interesting. That's I appreciate you sharing that detail with me. So it's interesting. You say you set out just to write it because it occurred to you that you should write it, but you didn't do it with the end game in mind of publishing it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's almost my favorite form of reading.
Okay.
Is memoir and autobiography.
Okay.
And I got quite inspired along the way by reading certain things, like Speak Memory from Nabokov and Mary Carr's Liars Club. And I say, wow. And so what I learned from them was that people's lives can be interesting.
Right.
And if they're told properly, that it might engage more than you or your family or your friends.
Sure.
And I was just plain lucky that I literally got discovered by my publisher, Lorraine Shiba, who runs Dorval Press in Calgary.
Okay.
And she came to me and said, send me it. And within like a couple of hours, she sent me a contract. She thought that it was well written.
Wow.
And that it needed some work, but that she's so excited, and so she's such a driving force behind this.
Nice.
that now I'm not only excited, but I'm actually worried people might actually read this book. Right.
Well, what worries you there? Like you mentioned the self-consciousness. Like now you're aware of what you're putting out there.
Yes.
Or? Yeah.
And I've tried to be so honest, and I've revealed a lot about myself, my younger self, more than perhaps my later self.
Sure.
And I've talked, but I've tried to give a reason. Why do I talk about trauma? Why do I talk about being unstable at a certain point of my life? Why? And I try to make a sense out of that. Okay. And in that way, perhaps others can relate to it,
Right on. I think that's a big part of the culture today is people, I don't want to use the wrong word, but the idea of trauma and processing that is very much in vogue. Not to say what you're doing is somehow cheapened, but it's very necessary, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And pretty much everybody who's written a memoir has gone from who was I? And how did I get to where? Right. I feel I have something to say because maybe I had an accomplishment. I created the Canadian Encyclopedia, and it's been fabulously reviewed, and it's used. Millions of people use it. So I feel that maybe there's a connection. Okay. And every time I read a book or a biography, how did you get from there to here? And that really is the process that I think is interesting in art. And so I try to focus on it and try to elucidate that as I'm telling my story. Right
on. So have you had to do a great bunch of introspection and self-searching before you could even begin to write, or was the writing that?
The writing wasn't really the release for me. Okay. I describe because I had a very difficult childhood, and I try to describe isolate the factors. My curiosity, my love of books. I met this magical psychiatrist.
Interesting.
And then I fell in love. And I think that I use these as signposts along the way that brought me to being. My publisher said to me today, Jim, the pictures of in the early part of the book when you were a kid, they're really dismal, but you seem to get really happy about midway through the book, and you're smiling at the end of it. I said, well, isn't that the story?
Isn't that the arc?
Isn't that it? Yeah.
Interesting. So, would you mind sharing, even if it's just a 140 character tweet about what it was in your childhood that was kind of that traumatic moment, or how would you frame that?
Briefly, my mother got pregnant and had me in the Second World War when my father was a soldier. Okay. And I was put into a home by my mother. She couldn't take care of me. And this wonderful woman took me in when I was 8 months old, and she kept me until I was 3. And she was this wonderful, loving person. And then my father made my mother, when he got back from the war, she came to take me. And that moment was the trauma of my life, where I had no need for memories. I had no need for introspection or anything. But when my so-called real mother, in my opinion, abducted me from this happy place, it divided my brain, it divided my world. And when I went to the new environment, my father was a drunk, a violent man, and my mother was extremely mean to me. So that's the trauma and the divided consciousness that I felt that I had to deal with as I was growing up.
Wow.
And that's now. To be fair, the woman who had adopted me when I was very young, she stayed in my life.
Oh, good.
She would have me holidays and bring me over, and she'd take me to Maple Leaf hockey games when I was a little kid.
Nice.
And so I still had, out of my neighborhood where I grew up, people ended up in jail. They ended up, always dropping out of school. But I feel that, and I try to write about this, I had a light that had been lit for me, and that I could follow, and I think that so that I try to follow that narrative through to the end.
A light that was lit for you, and that was in this woman that came and showed you what life could be.
Yes, wow. Exactly. Yeah.
Divided consciousness is a pretty, but I guess that's what trauma is in some ways, right? It's that that fissure, or that split in the self and the psyche, whatever.
And if you have that trauma, I learned you build all these defenses,
right?
And I built defenses against my so-called real mother and my father, who was very violent.
Okay.
And then those become useless to you at a certain point.
Right.
They become impediments to actually living a normal and happy life.
Yes.
And so the part of the story is, how do you strip these away?
Right. And some people go their whole lives and never even recognize the defenses, never recognize the trauma, and never.
I know some of those people. Yes.
Right. Well, there's probably more of them than not.
That's true.
I almost feel like.
Yes.
So how long then did you go through life living in this, I guess, violent, trauma-inducing place?
I lived at my mother and father's place until I was 13 or 14 years old.
Okay.
And then my father was committed to a mental institution, and my mother sent me to my first mother.
Okay.
And so I lived with her. And from that point on, the healing began. And in many ways, one of my great regrets is I wasn't very nice to my other mother, because I still had all these resentments. And she just loved me like her own child. And so I moved on from there. And,
That's, what a way to start out in this world, right? I suppose I feel lucky that I didn't have to have that fight with my family lineage, but did it maybe steel you against the world? Like, because you could have just given up, right? But it seems like maybe not.
But I never gave up. I was always, and I feel that now my siblings perhaps didn't do so well. I think that we're born with certain strengths and weaknesses as well, but I've always been competitive. I always wanted to do well, and I wanted to drive, and I'm the first person in my family, I've been gone back 300 years, who ever went to university.
Oh, wow.
And when I got into publishing, one job after another, I focused on it with all my might so that I could become successful at it. And I ended up with the best publishing job in Canadian history as the editor-in-chief of the Canadian Encyclopedia. So I think that some of that,
Sure. It lit a fire under your ass, to use a colloquial.
Exactly. It does.
I had a chance to read something that you wrote, I think right around the time you retired, and I was struck by, or I wanted to ask you, is there something about publishing, about the editing that fulfilled you in some way? Like, what was it, like the physical act that
words?
Okay.
It was words. I will never forget, in my first job, I got it out of sheer luck.
Right.
I had no experience, and I was very young, and I got this job, and the editor-in-chief of this company was furious that I'd gotten this job because I'd been given it, and he slammed a bunch of galley proofs down on my and said, "Proofread this dictionary. We're doing a dictionary." So I started proofreading this dictionary. And then I found this man, Peter West, and he became my mentor. We would discuss every word. Wow. And I found that I had an innate, perhaps, curiosity about words, but a love of words. And that's what this business is about.
Right.
And so that captured me from the very beginning and kept me totally focused on publishing. Other parts of it too.
Sure.
That I write about in the book that being an editor, it's a lost art now. Editors were gatekeepers. They made sure that you got things right, that they, and in many ways, I feel that publishing created democracy. Even all the books that were published, and the laws, and all the expressions of philosophy, and so on. It's all books, and much of it is eroded now. Everybody's an expert, and everybody can comment, and everybody can do these things. And I always felt that being a gatekeeper and helping an author express himself, but getting it right, was totally fascinating to me.
Sure.
very poorly paid.
Okay.
But
yeah.
so are you going to say you do it for the love of it?
Sure.
But I think that's why I loved it anyway.
Okay, that's really very interesting stuff. But I am curious about that idea of editorial authority. That came up a few times in that article that I read by you. And now it is true in Web 2.0, where it's like social media. It's all it's everybody is a contributor now.
Yeah.
How do we? Well, in your mind, how do we balance that? Because you do need that editorial authority in some cases, but also people have the right to free expression.
Exactly.
Too. So
I think I don't really resent anything that's happening.
Okay.
I'm sorry that there's a lot. I used to lecture at the university every year, and I used to talk about the great power of the encyclopedia is it's written by experts and checked by experts, and so the information that you're given is as correct as we can possibly make it.
Right.
And now this more wiki approach to things, I think it's not done. I think it's a process, and I feel that these things have to go through historical change.
Okay.
Right now, I think it's very poor. I always, say that books created democracy, that the social media created Donald Trump, and I think that is what we need to be aware of. It's very difficult to say these things without being called an elitist or, but I think that, so I will continue to talk about those things and hope that some of those things,
Sure.
I used to say to people, they say, why do we need the encyclopedia? We've got Wikipedia. And I said, would you want your doctors trained by a wiki, textbook?
Right.
And so I think there's still something, but I still think that there's a way that those, I'm hoping that they could be combined in the future.
Interesting. Well, what struck me too was when it came to the Canadian Encyclopedia, there was how many contributors? Thousands, right?
Yes, 3,000 more than,
Right. So as much as you might say you're an elitist, it's not like it was just you and somebody else cooking these up, right?
No. That's the way a lot of reference works are produced, but I determined from the very beginning, because of the nature of Canada, as I saw it, that there is no one central authority in Canada. I determined, there's an expression, it's an historical, philosophical expression, local identities, and that's how I saw the country, that someone in Antigonish is better to write about Antigonish and the people who live there, and Edmonton or Princeton or wherever. These are the people that should be writing about themselves, and to do it based on fact, and then I never had the huge nationalistic idea that this was going to be a big statement about who we are in the larger sense, but I thought it was a community that would come together and present a portrait of Canada, and you could look anywhere in it and see it. So that's why there were so many contributors, and it made it really hard on the editors.
I bet.
But I think that's why the encyclopedia was so well received. And
it was well received, wasn't it? Like I hate to say that it's maybe in some circles it's forgotten in some ways in the digital age, but. Yeah. Because my mom worked for you on that project, I grew up with those books in my house and opened them up today just to get ready for this. And it's like, wow, like this is, it is in some ways a lost art, something that from a bygone era, but how do you feel about the Canadian Encyclopedia today?
I'm feeling now. I put it online. I was online before Wikipedia, actually, and we had a success with that, but it was still driven by authority and by experts.
Right.
And I have, since my retirement, it's still online. It's still used by millions of people. But I think that it's lost two things in many ways. It's no longer a portrait of Canada that you can look at in books. You can look at those books, say they're out of date, but that was a portrait of Canada.
For sure.
But if it's constantly being updated and changed online, and that's probably inevitable. But they've also turned it into that everybody gets their say now. So I stay away from it.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of the authors that wrote for me say that they've just taken their name off it because,
Really?
But I don't know the internal dynamic that's driven the people who are now in charge of the encyclopedia.
Okay.
I'm not heartbroken about it or anything. I still
No.
feel that it was an accomplishment.
For sure.
Still used by all kinds of people. So so it's mixed. My feelings are mixed.
Okay, interesting. Because it was a triumph at the time, and it was...
We had great reviews.
Yeah.
You know what we sold? 150,000 sets of the first edition
Wow.
were sold in about 4 or 5 months. Now, that's 450,000 volumes.
Right.
And then we sold the second edition 3 years later, another 100,000 sets of 4 volumes.
Wow.
I think that, at that point, I think we were saturated, but that's
Right.
how many people... the encyclopedia has been used in Supreme Court cases,
Oh, wow.
and it's been used by kids for their homework. And,
Right.
I had thousands of people write me after the encyclopedia was published, and the things I loved was a high school student saying, I saved up my money and I bought these
Wow.
encyclopedias with my money, from my paper route, and I love them, and God, it makes you feel good.
Right, because it's the gift of knowledge, right?
Yes, yeah.
And there's a lot... the creation and the production of that encyclopedia occurred right here in Edmonton, not far from here, right, in Garneau.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's a part of Edmonton's history that may not be known by many people, but it's...
Yeah.
Why here?
Because Mel Hurdig, maybe he's kind of forgotten now. He was this incredible... I don't think anybody in Canada was as popular a commentator. If you needed somebody to say something about Canada or nationalism or whatever, Mel Hurdig was your guy.
Okay.
And he was a local publisher, and he was moderately successful. And a group of people came to him with an idea, you should do an encyclopedia. You're a Canadian nationalist. But he couldn't get money for it. And Peter Lougheed stepped in at the 75th anniversary of this province.
Right.
He said, I'm paying for the encyclopedia on condition, no other money. I don't want any federal money anywhere near it. So he paid Mel, it was $4 million that he gave him to produce the Canadian Encyclopedia for the development of it.
Okay.
And, I got to know Peter Lougheed quite well. And I remember... We had a wonderful lunch with the Governor General in Ottawa when the encyclopedia was published, and she said, "How could you work with a guy like Mel? You're such a conservative, and he's such a Canadian nationalist." And Peter said, I'm just as much of a nationalist as Merrill Hurdig is. And I love this country so much, and I wanted to give to Canada. And then he pointed to me and he said, Jim sorted it out for us. Which is one of the nicest things I ever had said about me.
No kidding.
Wow. So that's how it got created. Mm-hmm. And so I came here from Ottawa.
Okay.
300 people applied for the job. Don't ask me. Melton never told me why I was the guy that he hired, but he did. And then I hired 40, 50, 60 staff, and then they got all these contributors. This was the University of Alberta was fantastically helpful to us because we were based there, and it was this Edmonton project, and we were proud of that, and I still am.
Yeah.
I remember going to Toronto after publication. I went into my favorite bookstore in Toronto, Britnell's it was called, and I said, I want to tell you about the Canadian Encyclopedia. I see you've got copies here, and the woman said to me, why would we be interested in a Canadian encyclopedia made in Edmonton? As a Torontonian, my heart sank. And it ended up selling well down there.
That's good.
But you know what I mean? This country still got these divisions and isolated, not hatred so much as some of its hatred. Well, prejudices, let's put it.
Prejudice is right. A real sort of, a regionalism or a tribalism.
Yeah,
like that.
all of that.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
So what was the total operating budget then? You got the $4 million from the provincial government?
Yes, and Mel raised $4 for production. It was the biggest printing job in Canadian history, and he paid for that. And based on the money that the provincial government had put into it for the development of it, the banks gave him the money to do it, and he did really well.
Yeah, no doubt
from it, selling it out.
So of that roughly $8 million. Was a lot of the cost just in actually physically printing the thing?
Half of it.
Half of it went into just the paper and the book binding and stuff?
It's very expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. I became almost the sense of like when you're driving in the mountains and just the vastness of the whole thing strikes you. I was leafing through one of the encyclopedias and I just thought, they did this by hand, right? Like the typesetting?
The first of it, the first edition
Yeah.
was. And it was only between first and second edition where this programmer came to me from the University of Alberta and said, Jim, how are you doing this? I said, well, we had thousands of index cards for every article and every contributor. And then we'd have people typing up the articles. And he said, come with me. He marched me across the campus and he said, this is a computer. You know, and he was very proud of it. It was called an Amdahl, and apparently the only other Amdahl in North America that was in the military. And honestly, a portable would be more powerful these days, right?
Sure.
So we then started putting all the stuff into a database program. And I couldn't believe how much easier our lives were made by that. I could punch in who's this author? What's he writing? How far is he overdue? And how many words is he writing? So we could keep track of the length of the thing. And has he been paid or not paid? And all that stuff could be done so much faster. And so much, you know. So my life followed the digital revolution. Because we went from there, we're making the encyclopedia with digitally. And then we went, of course, delivering it. We went to CD-ROM. And then we went online. So the whole digital revolution, you know, equivalent probably to the print revolution of hundreds of years ago. And it happened in that short period of time. And I just sort of rode along, you know, on the top of this wave. And, and, you know, it's only every now and then you pause and say, well, what are the implications of that? You know, and the implications of printing were the spread of democracy and literacy and so on. And we'll see what are we going to be able to avoid the really bad things about that everything is digitized, that everybody's just a consumer and a shill? Or, I mean, I worry about it.
Absolutely. I do too. I think now, as we move towards Web 3.0, where you know everything exists truly digitally, augmented reality, virtual reality, currency is digital. You know, artwork is owned on a blockchain, not in real life.
That shocks me.
But it had me thinking today. Like, there's an app that you mentioned in one of your articles, Toronto in Time. That to me is a step in maybe the benevolent direction of what an encyclopedia.
That's what I tried to do.
In augmented reality would look like. Right?
Yes. Unfortunately, that was near the end of my career. And the foundation I was working for showed very little interest in it, and they're not even in print anymore. I did Vancouver and Toronto to actually take you from the encyclopedia on site to wherever. If you're walking in the place, you can learn about the people and the places, and that you could experience it through time. And I thought that's how I wanted to remake the encyclopedia rather than making it into a giant wiki.
I think that was the right instinct.
That was a failed dream, though. You know?
Was it?
Yeah, because they didn't. They didn't support it in the institution I was working for at the time. So
I think, if not you, somebody else could reboot that dream, because that is what augmented reality should do, and the so-called metaverse. You know, that's you know, you should be walking on the high-level bridge and be able to see the history of that bridge.
I that's and have it accurate and all the rest of it, you know, and have it engaging and now, I mean, you can do so much more. You could, we did it all with photographs, but you could do it with video, and you could do it with sound and all the rest of it. It could be a totally immersive experience, you know, a guided tour of the high-level bridge.
Absolutely,
I'm interested in it.
I would take it.
I know. Yeah.
And with augmented reality, a friend of mine joked, depending what your political stripes are, that's the tour you would take. Like, it would be this completely individual
choice.
It could happen. It could still happen. Maybe I'll push for it if I run out of ideas.
Please do. Yeah.
I want to really still spend some time on the Canadian Encyclopedia, because it's a formative thing, obviously, in your life, in my mom's career, in my life in a way too, not as indirectly, but secondary for sure. But 3 years, was it, from inception to the first publication?
5.
5 years.
Yes.
5 years of just like flat out work, or what
Absolutely.
was it?
Yeah. And you know what? And I write a lot about this. I just was so fortunate. I made a few mistakes early on. And when I came here, the knock on me was that I wasn't a manager. But I found the secret to management was to really get devoted people to come and work and to create a team. And I don't mean that in any cliche way.
No.
But I can't tell you the number of people who've told me this was the job of their life, was to work on this project and to focus on it. It would never have happened without that kind of commitment from them. And we used to sit and say, oh my God, the article on rat just came in, or the article on Lethbridge. I didn't think I was going to get that, and everybody was excited and slap it in the encyclopedia,
Nice.
And we hardly missed out on anything that we tried to do in the first edition.
Wow.
The 3.5 million words, and they all got edited, all got verified. It got, everything was checked and everything, and it was, and it's a full portrait. There's of Canada as well. There are thousands of illustrations in it.
For sure, it's a beautiful piece of work that again feels in some ways dated now when I look at it, but also just so authoritative and straight down the middle, like apolitical, like it just was.
That was the drive that I had.
Yeah.
When we had controversial subjects like federalism and separatism, I tried to get people to write those articles who were sympathetic to those things, and then we would pair these articles. So I've never seen. I see Canadian history as conflict. I think that when it's taught in schools, they miss a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I've written textbooks for Canadian students in Alberta. And my first history of Alberta, the book was momentarily banned because apparently I was the first textbook writer in Alberta history to talk about racism in this province, and they didn't want to hear about it. But we finally overcame it, and they actually published it.
Wow.
And that's the way I see Canadian history. You don't steer away from conflict. It's what creates the country. It's what creates the dialogue, and you might have to, like we did with Quebec, fight it in every generation. Fine,
right?
But it's not. And now we're dealing with much broader issues than just Quebec, right? There's all the multicultural issues and so on that we have, and yet we still seem to hang. We still seem to be hanging in there.
Do you feel that way? Do you have an optimistic outlook on the future of Canada?
No. Well, yes. An optimistic view that it will continue to exist, but not optimistic that it's going to have some kind of national identity. So I have a lament for that.
Right.
That's not going to exist. There were certain parts of my life that I thought, Canada,
right.
except for when watching the hockey team win the Olympic gold, which may not happen now. But, I feel that. So my feelings are mixed about it, as they should be.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess in that article again, and you've said it once yourself, is that you were a nationalist at one time, or you identified as a nationalist.
Yes.
What did that mean 40 years ago versus maybe what it means now?
I've tried to analyze that, because the people that I followed as nationalists, Mel Hurdig and Jack McClellan, who was the head of McClellan, and Stewart, and there were a number of others, and there were several Liberal politicians who talked about Canada. But when I analyzed it, all I saw that they meant was that we owned our own industries, that we cut out foreign ownership. And I kept asking, what does that mean culturally? What does that mean who we are?
Interesting.
Because to me, being I'm a cultural nationalist. I think that our authors and filmmakers and actors need to have a voice within their own country. And that's what I mean by being a nationalist. And if that means that publishing companies should be owned by Canadians, which they're mostly not, I don't know. But look at the writers that we have, and all the bright spots we have in our in music and and that, to me, if we can nurture that. I saw somebody the other day, because Norm Macdonald, the great comedian, died, but somebody said Canadians are way better comedians than Americans are. It's kind of because of where we come from. Well, that's a Canadian thing. If we can be funny, that's important to the world,
Absolutely.
There's something about being in Canada that's funny, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. For sure.
We can laugh at ourselves. I don't know.
Yeah, inclement weather maybe breeds some of that.
It is with me recently. We got iced in last week.
Oh man, wasn't that?
That was wicked.
You could skate downtown.
Yeah.
Last week.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I find that fascinating that you say these big sort of capitalist guys who said they were nationalists just meant I'm running my business the way I want to.
I feel that in retrospect.
Yeah.
And they spoke very well for Canada, and in many ways they were like against the Vietnam War, or they were
Sure.
against American policies, and they were against actually America in so many ways. And I feel that way in many ways too, that we can be different. We you know, with our own problems, and so I feel someone like Margaret Atwood was part of that nationalist movement, but she's a creative force,
Right.
and she's a powerful force for what I'm saying about our literature and
Sure.
our writers. You know, and these important people, all underpaid, of course.
Wow. Yeah, isn't
You
that
know?
the way it goes?
Yes, yeah, it is, but it's because they love it.
I guess it is. Yeah, and you the reward is richer. You know.
Yes.
That's interesting, though. Nationalism is something like fostering or protecting the identity of what it is to be a
Yes.
citizen here.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned earlier some multicultural problems, so to speak. How did, I mean, in the last just few years, we've seen this sort of explosion in an awareness of Indigenous and Aboriginal
Yes.
suffering. How did the encyclopedia maybe treat that 40 years ago? And do you have any regrets, or do you have knowing what you knew then?
Yeah. I don't have regrets, but I definitely see in retrospect that we were only, and I like to think, the beginning of the process.
Okay.
We didn't even have the names right. We didn't even have, and we had residential schools issue had not been revealed to us yet, but there were more words and more articles put into the Canadian Encyclopedia about who we called First Nations in those days than ever before. It was ever published before.
Wow.
And we tried to covered Native people in education, health, you know, poverty, and all these issues were covered. And yet, looking at it, I mean, if it were to be done now, that we're at a different end of the process.
Right.
I think there's more. Derville in Calgary, for example, is publishing a lot of books by Aboriginal and Métis writers, and so that's what I mean by culture. That's what I mean by
Sure.
voice. Those voices need to be heard,
Right.
and then people will start to perhaps overcome the prejudices that is holding this whole process back.
Right.
I don't see it ending anytime soon, but I do see it progressing.
Right on. It's interesting you say that the encyclopedia there was contributors that were Aboriginal.
Yes.
But you guys did that without any sort of, because today what's in vogue is that sort of gestural fanfare.
That's right.
Look how we're uplifting
Yeah.
these voices, but
Yeah.
you just did it because as a matter of course.
Yes, because it was part of my inclusive idea of what Canada is.
Right.
And they were a huge part of it. They always were since I was a kid, so I would call it a prejudice, but an interest. I always wanted to be Pontiac, you know, whenever we were having our wars in the neighborhood. And,
Okay.
and I was always, you know, I romanticized it, yes.
Sure.
But I think that there was also an interest. I never understood, though, until, and actually quite recently, that Canadians were a colonial power.
Yeah.
The native people were colonized.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the encyclopedia created under that
Interesting.
understanding. And I was certainly, if I had to do it all over now, that's where I'd start.
Yeah.
You know, now colonization has happened all over the world, and the native people themselves colonize one another and all of a sudden. But we never looked at it as a process like that.
Interesting.
We just thought that, you know, that the white people were going to move in, and the settlers were heroes, and they were in their own way, and then but other people had to suffer for it. And
Right.
it's really our thorniest problem.
sure.
Racism against the blacks are still the original sin in the United States, but
Right.
this is ours. And we need to resolve this.
Right on. No, I think that's very accurate. And when it came to myself in grade school, the way they dealt with colonialization, it was never even called that, you know.
No.
It wasn't until first year of university I read a book by Thompson Highway,
Yes.
Aboriginal writer, and
Yeah,
it was like,
wonderful.
oh, really?
That.
Right. And he didn't shy away from anything.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
powerful.
I wonder, do you see a role for the encyclopedia in this discussion going forward, or?
I think that the way that it's being handled now, I shouldn't say because I'm not really involved in
Right.
it, but I think there's a chance that if they open it up wide enough to more voices and get them heard, that I think, and then people just go to it and hear them. I've heard now, and it's sad, but we have to listen to it. A lot of kids are tired of hearing about this now, and that's going the wrong direction there.
Okay.
These voices should be everywhere. They should be in the media. They should be, every time there's a film, then we should be thinking about, or a book, we should be thinking about what's, how we can fit this into the larger narrative, and that will enrich it.
I agree. Also, but in the way that the encyclopedia did it 40 years ago, don't do it because we have to in this gestural way, as I've said. But do it because those voices are just
part of us.
For sure.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yes.
It's part of us. Yeah. I really always liked hearing stories about the encyclopedia because you guys just, as I understand it, you rented a couple houses and it was just a crew of you just kind of banging away.
We were.
What was the sort of atmosphere? What was the team spirit like back in those days?
I think I had a guy who only worked very part-time for me, and I don't even think I ever met him. Oh. And he said that walking into those houses was just the most incredible experience of excitement, of talk, of feeling. And I think one of my roles was to instill confidence. We can do this. This is going to happen. And we were supported in that by all the people who wrote for us. We want to be part of this. And so if you walked in there, and I didn't walk into it so much as never left. I was 7 days a week working.
Is that right?
Because I had a lot of different functions that I had to do.
Okay.
And I didn't so much manage people as that I just pitched in and gave directions when I had to, and then just watched people work. There was a lot of that. Your mom, for example, she handled this massive project that we had to get the encyclopedia translated, and all these files were flying back and forth from Montreal from our French publisher back and forth. And she organized all of that, and I just assumed that she would. I never stopped to say, "Is this too much, Deborah?" I mean, but no. But she did it, and I think she was proud of it.
Totally. The way she talks about it still to this day, you should have seen her yesterday. She hauls all these volumes up from the basement.
I'm so excited! Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's it felt, as much as it was this really sort of not austere, but like it was a reference work. It wasn't like there was a ton of room for creativity, but the process felt in some ways creative, right?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And and everybody felt that way. The contributors felt that way. Sometimes they had a lot of difficulty. A guy, I say to somebody, well, you're the expert on some topic, whatever, I don't know, the badger or something. But you only have 250 words, okay? Right. Because we got to fit it in. And they'd be struggling with that, know. And so there was so much contact with these people from coast to coast. And in writing these things and creating them and then shipping them out to us.
Wow.
So we felt not only among ourselves, but we felt part of a really big community of Canadians who cooperated in making this thing.
No kidding. Without getting too out there, it must have felt like you tapped into the spirit of the nation in some way.
We did at that time.
Yeah.
And I think it was still a time, and the Mel Herdigs and so on of those national, I've criticized them in a way, but there was still a feeling that there was something called Canada that could be kind of summed up, And one of my favorite reviews, one of Canada's historians said in his review that James Marsh held up a mirror to his country, and I can't imagine that anybody could say anything that would be more rewarding to me than that. So I guess that's what we managed to do.
That's huge, hey?
Yeah, it was.
Holding up a mirror, but then it's also I guess to follow that metaphor through, it's like the country would still have to look into the mirror and take from it what they could.
Well, a lot of people bought them. I don't know how many opened them, but a lot of people bought them.
No doubt. I was actually struck today looking at that. You guys chose a nice font for one thing. It was kind of it was a pleasing thing to look at, but also the amount of info crammed onto those pages is phenomenal.
It is, yeah, and it had to be because Mel Herdig had a price he had to sell it for the $4 million that he put into it, and I couldn't go over. When it all came in spite of the database program that we were using, we were 300,000 words over, and I had to sit and read the whole encyclopedia from cover to cover. I never got up from my couch. I had my headphones on listening to Sibelius and Beethoven and stuff.
Right.
I had to cut 300,000 words out of it to make it fit. And we had a great designer in Toronto, David Shaw, and he designed all of that, all the... And I still remember, and you said by hand, and you were right. I had to go to Toronto when we had what were called galley proofs.
Okay.
And that was from the typeset.
Okay.
And he and his assistant had to take scissors, and when you see a column, you will see that was, and he cut it there and say, Jim, we got to put a photograph in here, and you got to shorten the caption. And so I'd do that, and these things, and I remember one day, I said, David, he said, yes, and I said, what's that on your shoe? And it was a piece of an article was glued to his foot. So that's how it was made.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all done with a program now. I think my publisher herself has typeset this book. All you need is a typesetting. I know all you need. You have to know the programs and so on. But when I first started in publishing, and that was in the late 60s, it was all lead. The typesetter would push a button, and a little piece of a letter would go out. It would get filled with lead, and it would dry, and then it would be put in the sentence, in the word, and that's how things were typeset for over 100 years.
Lead.
Hot lead.
That's what the ink was?
That's what
how
impressed the ink.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. And then when it was all done, you melted it all down and you started all over again. And then to now, you could sit down probably in a couple of days and learn, and you can go on, you could send your book to Amazon and have it.
That's true.
Lay it out and all the rest of that. And it's... That part of technology is really good. That's really powerful.
Right.
And that's really shortening. All those poor typesetters who died of lead poisoning.
Oh, really?
It's terrible. Man. So I think so there's some things I'm not nostalgic about.
For sure.
But the changes are enormous.
For sure. I'm glad you brought that up, the whole, you could for sure type your own book and send it to Amazon and sell it.
Yes.
But I've wondered about this because I have a laptop now, so I can record and sing and play guitar and make music. Yes. I'm not a great musician, but I can do it now.
You can, yeah.
Should I release it to the world, though? You know what I'm saying? Is there a way where it's now, as you say, the gatekeepers have kind of been blown away, and everybody can... Yeah. There's good and bad, I guess, to that.
Do you think that there's still an idea of quality left? To say, this guy's a pretty good singer,
right?
And he's pretty good. He's not Robert Plant, but but I want to hear more.
Sure.
And so that would maybe then there'd be a mutual encouragement. But I still feel, don't you though, even as a musician, if you don't get picked up by a label, there's still a bit of for me to just go out and publish my own book. That how are you ever going to justify that's not just your own ego?
Right.
And that created that book. Whereas I feel with my publisher, whether she's got good judgment or bad, she applied judgment to it,
for sure.
And she makes an investment in it. And so therefore, if I were to tell my friends, "Oh, I'm publishing my own book next week," they would go yawn.
Yeah, great.
But I tell them, "You've got a publisher? I want to read that book." I'm serious. That's how people react when she's she's my gatekeeper. Right?
Truly, and I guess that's the debate. I'm glad we're bringing it up, and I don't know the answer because maybe it's different in my generation where I have this podcast, I have friends who release music, they make movies independently, completely, and no one says that it's any less or better without that elitist or that official seal on it. But also, as soon as you have a friend who gets a film into a festival or does get, he's like, I'm opening for someone at a concert. Then it's like,
then
right?
Pay attention,
right?
Because there's so much, and so what do you need to pay? I read books because I read reviews.
Okay.
I read the Times Literary Supplement and New Yorker and blah blah blah, and then I go straight order the book on Amazon. I don't go into a bookstore anymore and browse. I kind of know what I want because someone has said somewhere along the line that this is worth reading,
right?
And I've trusted them before, and that's what I do. I don't know. how many people do that, but I think that it's,
Yeah.
part of my process.
Interesting. I wonder if that's maybe just a generational thing. Like I joke with my parents. It's like
Yeah.
things used to happen, and then the news would come to your door the next day,
Yeah.
and you just trusted. Well, that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
I knew about that.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now it's like I hate to bring this up, but with the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, I saw that on Twitter moments after it happened, and
Yeah.
before they could scrub it. It was like, this is a different world
Yeah.
we're living in.
It really is.
You know?
It really is. Yeah. And unfortunately, and you're right, it theoretically it's a really good idea to have more voices, but if the voices are racist and
Sure.
neo-Nazi or whatever, and that gets equal billing
Right.
with things, I think that's very deleterious, and I think that's why you see the spread of right-wing movements and reactionary movements. And when I was a kid, polio had just hit, and all of a sudden it was announced on the news, in the newspapers, there was a polio vaccine. We just marched into school and given the polio vaccine.
Right.
But there wasn't any, it wasn't a chance for everybody, I'm not going to do that. And then everybody listened to that. Only the Jehovah's Witnesses had religious reasons not to do it.
Sure.
And that would be one kid in a classroom or something like that. Everybody who got in line and we didn't get polio.
Right.
But now,
Thank God.
everything to prove your resentment to government and to your situation in life not being what it could be if others hadn't taken advantage of you. These people now have this resentful voice that they can, expose. And so one of the things I'm wondering about right now is, was it always like this? Or has this been created? I don't know. Was it? I mean, in the mid-50s, were there people who thought that getting the polio vaccine was, going to make them stupid? Or
I was hoping you'd tell me.
no, I don't know.
I don't. What's something similar, like Vietnam, maybe? But I mean, that's a different thing. How about like abortion or birth control? The inception of that. Wasn't there some upheaval over that?
Oh, that was the worst article that I had to do. That was extremely contentious. It still is,
right?
But that was the point at which there was this huge fight. I had that article rewritten 12 or 13 times to try and balance it between what do you people believe and what do you people believe,
right.
and so on. And everybody can have their own private view of that. But to put an article in the encyclopedia was very difficult because it's hard to find middle ground. But I think, and I believe strongly, that if you don't search for the middle ground, we are flying apart.
Yes.
Within our ideologies right now.
Right. It's something like, who was it that said the center must hold?
Yes.
Yeats, maybe? I don't know. Well, everything is...
T.S. Eliot.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's right. I guess that's the role
Things fall apart.
Yeah.
The center will not hold.
Right. That's
That's true.
That's the role of centrist politics, I guess, or
yes, it is. Compromise.
Right.
One of the things that Canadians used to be known for,
right?
And ridiculed for, even that we had to compromise. And Confederation was this huge compromise, and we've had to live with it ever since. But it wouldn't have happened otherwise,
Right.
So right now, I see. I'm sorry to say, and particularly in this province, I'm exposed to a lot of hatred.
Yeah.
That's and I read something the other day that scared me, though. They said that you can't change people's minds. The part of their mind that they have made these crazy decisions with is dead and can't be spoken to anymore. So you can't knock them off this. You can't sit down with them and say, unless they get COVID and are dying themselves, and then say, I wish I'd taken the vaccine.
Yeah. But even then.
Even then,
sometimes.
I'm not changing my mind.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but there was one historical thing. I did write an article about smallpox in the 19th century, and the vaccine came along. And the vaccine in Quebec, the French Canadians refused to take the vaccine because they saw it as an English conspiracy. And I have quotes from French Canadians saying, I'd rather have my kid die than give him a vaccine. And that gave me an insight to today. What is it that the people who have these extreme views, what is it that they resent? Who is it that they hate? And a lot of times in this province, it's French Canadians or the federal government,
Yeah.
you know,
Trudeau.
that kind of thing.
Yep.
There's another part that might hate Kenny. So it's it might all balance out, you know.
But isn't that this is what I have discovered, I think, through doing this podcast or just paying attention to the world lately, is like so much of that, I hate Trudeau, I hate Kenny, I hate the French.
Yeah.
It's, I hate me, and I have no control over myself.
I agree with you.
That's
true.
Politics to me, Jim, is personality.
Yes.
And it's also now religion, you know?
Yes. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
So I don't, a lot of it to me is BS. It's just like you can put whatever word you want on it, but you're warring with yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I know.
I mean,
but I have conservative friends, and I for years sat and talked to them about climate change. And they, for whatever reasons, some of it's religious and some of it is, you know, too much government, and there are all these things. And 5 or 6 years ago, they even seemed to almost make some sort of sense that it wasn't happening. Who could say that now? And so, you know, so I feel, well, I was right and you were wrong, and but they still resent me for, they're not going to read my book, you know, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now there are other things that I certainly feel that I might have been wrong about, or that I got wrong along the way, and I don't know whether I like to think that I've changed my mind, and I still remember I changed my mind in a big publishing meeting I had, and the head of the publishing company said, "Jim, you changed your mind pretty easily," and he said, "Why'd you do that?" And I said, "Because I was wrong." And he stared at me like I was from some alien planet, you know? You're supposed to fight to the death for the thing that you came out of your mouth,
right?
You know?
Right.
So that makes it a difficult world for sure.
No, it does, because I guess it's the ego people have, or ignorance, or some combination.
Yes. And those resentments, I look for those now.
Okay.
Know? Yeah.
Like in yourself or in others? Or?
Well, when I see people,
right.
You know, really
right.
Fighting things that I think that are crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure. That reminds me of something I read in that article today. You approached the encyclopedia job with a lot of, was it humility or modesty or something like that? You said.
Did I?
I don't know. I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
What was your leadership style when it like day one? What
I think I had not had management experience.
Okay.
But I had a lot of experience working with groups of academics.
Okay.
I was on council boards, and I was working with on a board, on a publication board, where people talk to one another, and then I learned. I thought that how I could show leadership was do the work. I always felt I'm never going to go in. I was on the board of the National Museums, and I went to meetings for years, and I always said I'm going to be the most prepared person to walk in the room, and that's what I thought of as leadership. And I was always willing to do whatever work it took, and I was always going to know what anybody is talking about, and that's what I thought. And I think I had that from the beginning, and I had to, unfortunately, at one point, I had a couple of staff who maybe tried to take a little bit of advantage of my easygoing, and I had to toughen up, and I actually had to fire 2 or 3 people, and I hated that.
Yeah, that's tough.
It was terrible, but it's inevitable.
Right.
And then it got really, really careful about. I used to, when I had to hire somebody, I'd take them for a walk, or you know, or maybe even go out to dinner with them and then talk to them, and maybe go to their house and meet their family, and all of a sudden, you know, the person come and work for me. We know we're going to get along. You know. Wow,
that's bold, I would say, even like to.
Well, yeah, I was lucky though, and I feel that I did it the right way. So
cool.
Yeah.
So you felt good about the team that you assembled for the encyclopedia, like just based on that?
I had to make a few adjustments. In it. And I had to break one of the rules that Mel Herdig had. He wanted everybody here, and I finally. So I couldn't get the senior editor's skill, and I said, Mel, I'm sorry, I need 2 more senior people. And they only exist in Toronto, and I'm going to let them work out of their homes. So we were way ahead of the time in that. So that, and when I got those 2 people and put them together with the team I'd put here, I never had another staff problem after that.
It just clicked.
It did. Yeah.
What was your relationship like with Mel? Like, how often would he come in and knock on the door and say, "How's it going?" Or was he kind of hands off?
Mel, when I had my, and I describe it at length, I won't go into it now, but a very interesting interview process with him trying to hire me. It's the most important decision he had to make.
Right.
But when he said, okay, I'm going to hire you, Jim, and I said, okay, but I've got a condition. I'm writing my contract. And he said, go ahead, do it. And I put in my contract that I had final say on everything in the encyclopedia.
Wow.
He signed off on it.
Huh.
So he used to phone me.
Right.
Well, especially when the galleys came in.
Okay.
He'd keep me on the phone for 2 or 3 hours, saying, Jim, I know a lot about this, and you should change this, or you should change that, and you should put all these statistics in that I found. And he would go on and on and on about it, and then he'd always finish by saying, it's up to you. And I rarely took any of his suggestions, but I couldn't say, Mel, you can't, he was my boss.
Right.
And he was interested, but he always wanted to make it into a more nationalistic thing. And, and he wanted to pour statistics in it. He thought that people would like that. And I thought it was the opposite. They'll be out of date the day that it's published,
Right.
Who cares if Calgary has got 20,000 fewer people than Edmonton,
right.
Whatever. So I used only the Statistics Canada census statistics through the whole thing, and it's all consistent throughout it. So that, to answer your question, the only time that he ever, in quotes, interfered was that he found out that I had given the Peter Lougheed biography to a person whom he considered too right-wing.
Oh, okay.
And I said, send it out and have people read it, Mel. That'll be fine. And they all came back and said, it's fine. So that was the only time that he ever spoke to me about any of these things. And he never, and I mean, it was really brave of him, right? He's putting his whole life into this business, everything.
Yeah.
And he learned to trust me to do it. And so I guess he could look through, well, you got that guy to write that, you got that guy to write that. We not only had all these writers, but we had hundreds of consultants who were all university professors or, researchers or whatever. And so I think that he could look, what's Jim up to, kind of thing, Britannica came up and looked at us about 2 or 3 years into the process, and they tried to buy us. They were so impressed with what I was doing.
Really?
So I think that helped him. To see that I was maybe on the right track.
Right.
But, honestly, though, I mean, with, 6 months left, we only had about 20% of the thing was delivered. Jim, 4 years to 20%, what's going to happen,
Right.
And I used to joke with him and say, James Murray did the entire Oxford Dictionary. He invented it, and he died at the letter D. Don't tell me that, Jim. He'd say,
Oh no.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes.
Like he got to D and that's as far as he made it.
Yeah. The other people finished it, obviously.
Sure, but was it the stress or was it just something else?
I think it was partly the stress, but he was a little older as well by the time that he started that, But it scared the hell out of him. Caught in the Web of Words is the history of the making of the OED, and I read it just before I took over, and it was really inspiring to me. And, he left behind, if I had died in the 4th year or something, it would have, the encyclopedia would have still, I put it in process, and that was the important thing.
Right.
And the editors could have finished it without me,
Interesting. You just kind of put the right people in place, open the doors.
That's what you do. And that's my idea of it. And I don't know if that sounds like a cliche, but it's really what I feel that I did with the staff. And,
That makes sense.
I always like to look at people. I always say, people say to me, don't you think so-and-so looks like so-and-so? And I say, I don't ever see things that way. I always see people as completely different. I don't care if they're brother and sister. I don't care what. I don't look for similarities. I see. And I think I did that with my staff.
Right on.
Who are you? What are you strong at? And what can you do? And I think that I tried to support them in that.
Right on. Yeah. When I read that article and you kind of told the story about how you got the job, and then there's all these people who were kind of not super nice in the way they congratulated you or didn't.
Yeah.
Did you sense a lot of jealousy from your peers? Because you were Some, yeah.
Yes. Oh, you're the guy who got the 35,000. It doesn't sound like very much money now, does
Yeah.
it? The 35, because it was in the Globe and Mail in huge letters.
Oh, really?
You got the 35,000. You know. and I loved it in a way, but it was also most jealous that this really terrific historian, intellectual at Carleton University, when they had a farewell party for me, and he leaned and he whispered in my ear, "You got the best damn job in Canada, Jim." And I could hear it in his voice that it wasn't purely congratulatory, you know.
Like he thought he maybe should have been in the running for it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that goes back to that old ego thing, right? Where these guys, you know, they couldn't... Do you have a sense of why it was you? Because 300 applicants, you said, that Mel had to sift through? Why you?
I try to analyze that in my own... I think that once again, I came prepared.
Right.
He interviewed a lot of people. He brought a lot of people out here. But I talked to people in Ottawa. I found out there had been an encyclopedia produced in Canada in the 1950s. I went straight to the National Archives. Okay. I went into all the files of the editor-in-chief. And I wrote what he did wrong and what he did right. And I had a friend at the National Archives, and I said, "Is there anything written," because I couldn't find it, "on how to make an encyclopedia?" And this person found me 2 articles written in an obscure library science journal, how the Columbia Encyclopedia was put together.
Wow.
And so I learned so much from that when I was talking to Mel or the other people he had interview me, I was able, this is how you do it. So I think that was part of it.
Okay.
That they could see I was prepared and that I could do that.
Right.
But Mel told me, though, there was a dispute with another person that he hired called the general manager. And I was unhappy that this person had a lot of power that might override the editor-in-chief and so on. And so I called this guy in, and we had a long, lively chat.
Okay. And
he's this really tough Scottish football player, and I was this really tough guy from lower class Toronto.
Right.
And we had it out, and it went really well. And then I phoned Mel, and I said, "This is how it has to go." And he said, "Now I know you can do the job."
Whoa.
So all the stuff intellectual or preparation-wise, I think unconsciously I had to show a little bit of toughness.
Sure.
That he said, "Okay, I know you can do it now."
That's interesting, hey? As bookish or as literary as this pursuit was, he still wanted a hard guy a tough guy.
Yeah, that certain toughness to them,
sure.
Right? And I rarely had to show it, but I could when I had to, you know. I always thought of myself that I'm a non-confrontational person, but anytime anybody's ever challenged me, they'll find that whether it's at tennis, you know, or other things that I can rise up and defend myself, and I think that. But he never told me, and I asked him many times, "Why'd you hire me? Why'd you hire me?" And he never told me. So
interesting. Maybe it doesn't matter after a certain point, right?
No, it doesn't.
You got the job.
No. You know, I analyzed Mel, and I thought that he was the kind of person who really did things on other people's advice. He had all kinds of people interview me, talk to me. Okay. I went to a meal here when I came out from my interview, and all the top media people, were there,
right.
And journalists and broadcasters and all the rest of them, and they would sit, and Mel would watch me talking to them. I guess so. Maybe that helped. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so anyway. We did it, so
yeah, you did it. You did it. What was the party like in 1985?
It was great.
Yeah.
I wish that we'd had a videotape of the Tommy Banks band was there.
Oh wow!
And there were several thousand people in the Citadel Theater.
Oh wow!
The pictures are terrible.
Oh no!
Whoever took the pictures are from afar, apart.
Right.
And then we went into the big theater there. And David Shaw had made an encyclopedia about 6 feet or more tall.
Okay.
And then when Mel went up, he opened it up, and there were stairs up.
Oh,
and
man.
so there's a picture of me when I stood up. It's one of my favorite pictures. It's not a great picture, but I'm standing there, and I've got my eyes cast down, and everybody, cheered me on, and it was a wonderful experience. So Mel Hurtig, Peter Lougheed, and myself spoke at that, and then we drank champagne. There were towers of champagne glasses pouring and all the rest
Nice.
of it. Kind of a cliche party, but
Why not?
it was worth it.
Totally.
It got press, which is what you're looking for, right?
Right. You wanted to. So I guess I'm curious about the marketing effort. How did you market it at that time?
Well, Mel, that was his great strength.
Right.
I had nothing to do with that literally, but he had to negotiate with the chain bookstores, in the independent bookstores, and he had to get the price just right, and he had to not give discounts to one and not other. And he balanced that beautifully, and Mel commanded the national media. And, one of the great TV shows, what was it called? Forgotten. It was a weekly news program came out. And Hannah Gartner came out and interviewed Mel and interviewed me. And that was on national TV. I think that really helped.
Yeah.
And Mel had very good connections in the press, but they were, in those days, I always say, we had over 200 reviews. All but 2 of them were totally positive.
Okay.
And which was great. When we produced a CD-ROM and sold almost as many copies, 0 reviews.
Interesting.
Once we went into the digital world, we moved past that whole process. That part of it is editorial, and part of it is publicity, and part of it is reviewing. People review games, okay?
Yeah.
And that's worth more than publishing would ever dream of being worth.
Yeah.
That's worth more than all the other film and everything put together. And you know this as well as anybody, I'm sure. And so when we had a CD-ROM, there were these tech shows in Vancouver and Toronto. And they said, listen, you should do the Canadian Encyclopedia. It's Canadian. Are you kidding? Microsoft and some game are our sponsors. Why would we talk about the Canadian Encyclopedia? I knew that the encyclopedia, as being a statement of what Canada is, was lost. And any idea that somebody would review it, encourage people to buy it, was gone. And how do you advertise online? Well, you do it. I learned how to do it early on with Google and keywords and all kinds of tricks. That I had a full-time guy who was in charge of that and did wonderful things for how many views you get all the rest of that. Yeah. But that's different from somebody in a respected newspaper who's reviewed books for 20 years saying, you ought to get this, which is what they did with the encyclopedia, right? So Mel was so successful at that. And so he did a national tour, but he only did the top spots. Okay. And I did a national tour. It took me 6 weeks or something. And I went to, Halifax and St. John and St. John's, Newfoundland. And I had a blast.
That sounds fun.
Doing that, Yeah. But I learned never to get tricked into doing a trivia contest. I'm terrible at that. People think I know stuff, right? And then I just, and I got stuck in Halifax. And after that, I said, no, I'm not doing trivia. I'll talk about this. I'll answer questions. You name it, but I wouldn't do. I've got a fair knowledge about things, but you can't.
You never know.
You can't. No.
That's interesting though. They're trying to stick you edited the encyclopedia. Let's see how much you know. It's like,
when I was in Halifax, somebody phoned in and said to me, what species of fish is a mackerel? And I said tuna. He said, he slammed the phone down. I thought, I'm going to nail this, So the next person phones in and says, there was a murder committed in Cape Breton in 1934, and he names the person, was convicted of that murder, but he was wrongfully committed. Who really committed that murder?
Yeah.
I don't know. You call yourself an encyclopedist? And he slammed the phone down on me. So I thought, that's it. I'm not doing that again.
Where were you where people were just calling in like that?
Well, on these phone
radio
shows.
Oh, okay,
yeah. The radio phone-in shows.
That's hilarious.
They're still on, eh? They still have them. I don't listen to radio much anymore.
No,
but
me neither.
It's like all the people who phone in on the sports shows.
Oh, God.
Yeah, fire that bum. They should have traded or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's an expert on one thing, right? One big thing that they are,
And when they come from a place of emotion, especially when it comes to sports, I find, do you listen to much sports talk radio at all? Or?
I do, because I think, I listen to this, I read The Athletic.
Okay.
And I listen to Satellite.
Okay.
Because it's not so, you can't listen to local because they're all owned by the local team and nobody tells the truth about anything, right?
Right, like
So I
Ched for sure.
So I like to see, because I'm interested in sports about how do you build a team and how do you put it together and how do you balance all these things and analyze what mistakes are made and why are so many teams so bad. So I have I do listen, I have to say.
Okay, no, I was just curious.
It's a hobby.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, you're. Is it true that as we go off here on a tangent, that Harold Ballard is not in the Canadian Encyclopedia?
Yeah, I refused.
Really? Eh?
Well, he might be now, but
Might be now. Not under your.
He ruined my Leafs.
Yeah, no
He
kidding.
traded Lanny McDonald.
That's man. And you said you were there in '51.
Yep.
When they won the cup.
Bill Barocco scored his goal. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the lady I call my granny, who was the woman who adopted me, and she would take me to the hockey games, and she'd get me in on her seat, and I'll never forget because I loved this guy Bill Barocco, and I wrote down the number 5, and I said, "Who is he?" And he scored the goal, and then he was killed in a plane crash.
Yeah.
And so every sport I've ever played, I always took number 5, and it's my sacred number to this day. And unfortunately, it's sort of like the True Cross. There's so many people who say they were there that they probably think I'm making this up, and I have no proof that I was actually there except the vivid memory of it.
Wow. Yeah. So he scored that goal, they won the cup, and then that was his last game?
He went on a fishing trip in the summertime, and they didn't find his plane for 9 years. And they, of course, there was just a skeleton in it with the pilot.
That's crazy.
He was in the densest bush in northern Ontario, It's really... so, talk about tragic, eh? He scored the winning goal in overtime to win the cup and died.
Damn.
That was a profound experience for me as a kid.
Was it, eh? Was that like a big deal at the time?
It was huge.
Yeah.
Huge deal. It was front page news. And for a little kid, 7, and then having been there and seen that goal and loving the Leafs and him being my favorite player, I think it might have been my first little premonition of death.
Yeah, you got right.
Oh, wait a second here. I thought we lived forever.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
No. So it was a big deal. Yeah.
A formative thing. Yeah. So you came to Edmonton for the job in 1980?
That's correct, yeah.
What a year to come to Edmonton if we're talking hockey, right? That was the beginning of the...
I was slightly resentful. How is it the Leafs haven't won the cup for 100 years?
Right.
And you didn't even have to draft Wayne Gretzky, but Mel Hurdig got great seats.
Oh, nice.
And I got to go and to see Messier or Coffey pick up the puck in their zone and head out of there. It was spellbinding.
Yeah.
And so I really grew to love that team as well. Well, you had to, because the Leafs were nowhere in those days,
Yeah.
And of course Gretzky was a huge part of it. But there was, and they thought Edmonton thought they were going to win the cup forever, right?
Yeah, that's how I think that's how it felt for sure. It was like
4 years in a row, and then they missed one with Calgary,
for sure.
And then Gretzky left, and Messier won.
Right.
Another one, right?
Right. It was 5 and 7 years, but it was like 8 or 9 years of just.
Yeah. I see Messier's got a memoir out. I saw it in the bookstore today. Yeah.
Did you think about picking it up? Think about buying it?
I read almost everything online, so I might.
Yeah.
I might.
For sure.
I don't think it's going to be a literary memoir, but I've always thought he was a straight shooter, and so he might have something to say that's not just cliches.
Could be. I mean, he was a pretty strong leader in his way. Apparently, he was brutal.
He defines that, eh?
Right.
That kind of leader. Yeah. Well, I went to the New York Rangers.
Right.
And it was at the end of his career, and apparently, he practically dragged them by the nose through.
Right to that '94 Cup, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he call it in the press conference?
Yes,
too?
he did.
We're gonna win.
Yeah, and told his teammates, "You better win."
Yeah, no kidding. You got to take that back to the dressing.
Because he was a great player. He was, But we lived in a building, and Glenn Anderson lived in the building, and he was a flaky guy, and he used to say hello. And my wife went into the sauna, and he was in there one day, and she was sitting there and said, why didn't you turn the sauna on? So she, what? So
really?
She turned the sauna on.
He's just kind of spaced out in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, he was. And so he'd bring the cup after they'd win it. He'd bring it into our building, and everybody got to, drink out of it, but to, caress it. I never got that close to the Stanley Cup before. And he had some crazy parties in that house, So those guys
they went hard.
They did. Yeah.
There were, what always struck me was those years that they won the cup at home and they would let fans on the ice to celebrate.
Oh, can you imagine now?
You couldn't.
Not even COVID, but I mean, geez.
I think that stopped not long after the Oilers did it.
Yeah.
Because that's insanity.
Were they? I don't think they were the first to actually carry it around, though, were they? I think that had started before they started it.
Yeah.
Because they just they never used to do that in my day.
Oh, really?
No, they just wheel it out, and the captain would, they have their picture taken around it, and that was it. But to carry, I think it's one of the greatest things about the celebration is passing the cup to one to another, and how they've got it worked out, the priorities of it and stuff. It's great.
It is so great. Like I've seen like I happened to watch when the Raptors won that year, and I was struck by how different it was, how they didn't really seem to care.
No, they don't stand and shake hands with one another. The hockey's superior in all those ways, I think. But
sure.
Is McDavid ever going to be able to lift the cup up?
I'll say yes. Okay. I'm still optimistic.
Okay.
What about you?
I just think it's too hard to build a team, and if you got behind on this and salary cap and everything,
right?
He might have to demand a trade to get one. I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible.
But he's so special. To me, he's the best ever. And I watched Bobby Orr. He was always my best ever, even over Gretzky and so on. And now I have never seen. I think only maybe Pavel Bure in his two best years looked a bit like McDavid, and I don't know, you wouldn't remember Gilbert Perreault, played for the Buffalo Sabres, and for about 1 or 2 years he had that speed and that ability. McDavid's got it every game.
Every game, every other shift.
Yes.
And there's nights when he's doing it every chance he gets.
Yeah. Yeah. He's special.
I'm glad you said that, because I said that to somebody and they said, well, it's Gretzky because they rewrote the rule book and they changed the way they defended to move with Gretzky. Whereas McDavid is just individually superior. Oh. Gretzky reshaped the game. I don't know, because I wasn't alive really.
Yeah.
To me, McDavid is the best. I have the privilege of being in there many nights with my work, and it's like,
see it.
Just watch that guy.
I know.
It's not human.
I have my prejudice in sports, and a lot of my friends disagree. I like playmakers. I don't care if it's football, baseball, or hockey.
Right.
And it's not the grinders or whatever. Yeah, you need all those guys to win, but I look who can make a play, who can score the goal, and nobody beats him.
No.
In that. I just and I'd love to see him play for Canada.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look good right now.
Are they not going to send NHL players now to Beijing? The
problem is if you get hurt, and the NHL says we're not paying you if you get hurt.
Right.
And so the IOC is going to have to come up with the money to say if you get hurt, we'll pay you. And if they don't do that, the players aren't going.
Right.
I can't say I blame them for that. No.
To me, it's hardly worth it for. I don't think it means the same to them to go play in the Olympics.
I think it means a lot.
Yeah.
And McDavid desperately wants to do it. And Crosby's been there and he wants to go back.
True.
And, I'm not sure we could win it. I mean, Austin Matthews is probably the second best player in the league right now.
You think?
Yeah. And he's American, and we don't. Who's going to be our goalie?
Good question.
With
Fleury. Or is he past?
Man, I would think he'd be past it, Meanwhile, the Leafs have got the best goalie in the league. Jack Campbell, he's got the best record, period, save percentage. And he's American.
He's American.
No!
Yeah, that's a great... Who is Canada's goalie? Is
I don't
Price
know.
Back from his rehab?
No, and not till the end of December, apparently.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. Because he is a great goalie, as he showed in the playoffs last year.
Right.
Of course, he can still do it.
Right.
But he's on drugs and has to clean himself up. It's sad, eh?
Is that what it was? Drugs? Yeah.
He finally admitted it.
Huh.
Yeah. Nowadays, you say, well, especially if you're a tennis player, well, I'm having some mental difficulties,
Right. Because of...
Get over it, You can skate like that and you got mental difficulties?
Yeah.
Get on with it, buddy.
I have mental difficulties too, by the way.
Yeah. And I go to my job every day, whatever. But I think that, but he finally admitted, and I think it's right to do that.
I think you have to, yeah.
Yeah, that can even affect someone like him, It's too bad, but...
But thinking about, 98 in Japan, 2002 in Salt Lake, 06 was a bust, I guess, but those were great moments in Canada hockey.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And they had to fight for them.
Yeah.
They weren't, it's not given to us in any stretch. The Russians, fortunately, don't seem to know what a team is. I mean, they've got, man for man, fabulous players.
Always, yeah.
Was I watching some team, some Radulov or something? I can't remember what. The Oilers played them 2 nights ago, and this guy was dominant.
Oh, yeah, who was that?
Yeah, I've forgotten his name.
Like, he was on Minnesota.
Yes, a really big guy. And
I know. He had a night. He had a great night that
night.
I
know, and so if he does that against Canada in the Olympics, that won't be good, but
Could be trouble, but you're right, they often don't. Canada pulls together in those moments, right?
But I think the greatest defenseman in the league right now and for the next 10 years is Mahar, and he's Canadian.
Oh, man.
So
is he Canadian?
Yeah.
That kid in Colorado.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah.
He skates.
He's fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he might break the goal scoring record this year, actually. Coffey's.
For defenseman.
Keeps it up, yeah.
Wow. That's great to see.
Yeah.
He came out of college, right? He did 3 or 4 years and then.
I know.
Yeah.
Man. I think 1 or 2 passed on him. That was a mistake.
Big time.
He's brilliant.
But you never know, right?
Especially with defensemen, they say.
So, for sure. They take longer to mature is the wisdom.
I guess. Don't we all?
Yeah, we're not all McDavid in our daily life,
no,
I guess.
That's true. Right? Yeah.
2010 in Vancouver, I should have said as well. That was
fabulous.
That was the moment.
Yeah. And with the women, too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And there was that thing where the Americans were standing on the flag or something, and they,
they're Americans.
So, I would be remiss, I guess, if I didn't bring up the fact that we have a common acquaintance with Bill Beard, a film studies professor at the university. I would just say, well, that's great that you're friends with him. What's kind of how did you meet Bill, and would you like to say a few words about him?
Well, I was introduced to him, as I say, because I was new to this city.
Okay.
And, I might have been whining about not having any friends. And and this library science person said, I know someone.
Okay.
Maybe she saw something in me and she saw something in him.
Sure.
And somehow she set up something between us and we hit it off. And we started off so well because it was at the very time the CD was invented.
Okay.
And you've got to. He saw that I had a really nice stereo and I had a classical music collection. So we have that in common. So we went out. We actually had to go to audio stores.
Okay.
Were the only place we would get these CDs, and so we'd go in. Now Bill's a bargainer, and my friends in Toronto call me list price Marsh. I just pay what is ever there, and he's always bargaining and stuff. So we had conflicting interests at that point, and then he would say to me, "You need that. You have to have that." And he gave me the most fabulous advice. He introduced me, and I said, remember him saying something wonderful to me one time. God, I wish that I could come to classical music knew the way that you are now. I knew classical music, but nothing like his depth. And he saw my excitement and that he could introduce me to an opera by Verdi that I'd never heard before. So we clicked there, and then I just tried to attach on and learn about film from him.
Right.
And particularly when he found out that I had an interest, but not really a knowledge about Japanese movies.
Okay.
He introduced me to Ozu, who's my favorite, and Tokyo Story. I would never have known about it if Bill said and when Bill said I had to watch something, I did it, and so I also Mizoguchi and all that great group, and as I said, my experience going to see Kurosawa with him. So we shared that and spent quite a lot of time together, and then discovered a common interest in hockey as well. So that kind of, I'm not seeing as much of him, of course, now. He's near the end of his career at the university, and we've had this damn pandemic,
right?
So it's just not, we used to walk our dogs together and that sort of thing. So I always just imagined that he must be a wonderful teacher, because he was to me. you know, and he's got a lovely voice. I always think that's underestimated.
Absolutely.
See, I'm worried about my voice, you know, reading this audio book, but so I'm kind of
thinking about
but
it.
you know, who hears their own voice, you know?
I don't think you ever do you?
No.
That's interesting.
You know, even if you tape it, it's still a distant thing.
And it's still, however, the microphone processed it.
All of that,
you know?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
right, and then it's feeding back through your own self-consciousness or whatever.
But what about digital technology? Can you say, well, I'd rather be more of a baritone?
Yeah, totally.
You know, I like a little more, you know, echo in my voice.
For sure.
Although my publisher, Lorene, told me that you can change pitch. You can change the.
Sure, you could.
You know, without change speeds without changing pitch.
Change speeds without changing pitch. That's interesting.
Because my fear is going too fast, and she said we can slow it down. And I said, well, won't that? We used to do that on tape.
Yeah, for sure.
It would go like this,
Right.
you know. So if she's right about that, that would
Okay.
be. She knows a lot about audiobooks, so I'm hoping.
I guess it would just be some kind of formula that as fast as you went, they would know what the pitch change would be and just.
Yeah, write an algorithm.
Write an algorithm.
Yeah,
That's great.
So
That's interesting what you said about Professor Beard, because he opened my eyes to Ozu as well. We took a whole class on Ozu, and
wonderful! How lucky you were.
man, that changed my life as far as what
Yes.
it's like. Film could just breathe and just let it. You know, there's moments just like set the camera down, the action plays, the scene ends, and the camera keeps rolling.
I know.
On an empty room.
At that same level that he got down to all the time. And people's faces were allowed to stay still and to show emotion. And that young woman who had lost her husband in the war and sitting with the two parents, and just I feel the strong emotions that flowed between them. And it wasn't really in words, was it, you know?
No.
And when the old couple's sitting on the beach later, I mean, I cry every time I see it. I can't help it. That's the power.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of documentaries about how he did these things, and he was
Okay.
very, very perfectionist. And
Okay.
you know, and what's her name? The great actress.
Setsuko Hara.
Oh, yes. I had her as my screensaver at one point. I
believe
just
it.
totally fell in love with her.
Totally.
You know, she's not only beautiful, she was just a great actress, and she was a mysterious person.
Oh, really?
She never seemed to have had an affair if it wasn't with him, and she denied that. She lived out in the country, and she wouldn't take interviews, and so Greta Garbo of Japan, but a much greater actress probably. You know? So
Because she had a range where like
yeah, she did a lot
he
of
had
movies.
that right, like he had that kind of core group.
Yes, yeah.
Chishu Ryu, I think, was that guy with the kind of the crew cut and the mustache.
that guy was fabulous.
But they could play any age. It seemed like.
Yeah, they did.
You know?
They did. Yeah.
But it's interesting because you would think that Professor Beard would have seen those movies dozens of times, hundreds of times.
Always see something in them.
Right, and he would bring that fire to like a Tuesday afternoon in November. He'd just bring that fire purely because he loved to do it. Yeah, that's what I think everybody should have a chance to learn from.
And I would say when he introduced me to Ozu, he was virtually unknown, but there's never an international list of films anymore that doesn't put it first.
Really?
The greatest movie of all time. It's it's not the usual things. It's Tokyo Stories there or close to it. So it's gotten its respect and it's gotten well known. But you know, I have no success in introducing it to my family. My wife has loved it when she's seen it. But you know, I would never say to one of them, you really should see this movie, you know. And I have a Japanese friend. She was actually born in Canada, but she was really proud of her Japanese heritage. And she said, Jim, what you're interested in these films? What should I watch? And I said, well, Mizoguchi did a great film called The 24 Ronin, and apparently both her sons fell asleep in it, and she practically tore it to shreds before she gave it back to me. They were so bored by it.
Right.
You have to breathe is the right word.
Yeah.
You have to be able to let it breathe and let it come to you, and that's where the art is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I guess you have to be prepared. You have to almost know that this film is gonna be this. It's gonna be slow.
Yeah. You have to pay attention to it, and you have to be in not the right mood so much, but you have to. You know, I've read books about, and I still find things in it that I hadn't seen, or you know. And he was a kind of a strange man himself too, you know. But talk about a perfectionist. And, there's the war and they got destroyed and then an atomic bomb and then they had this intermediate. As soon as the Americans left, it seemed to, that's creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think just the three top guys, and they weren't the only ones. There were many others in Naruse and others who were doing films at the same time as Mizoguchi and Ozu,
But at the same time, they did those films that, like I understand, just an assembly line. Like they'd pump out one a year, right?
Yeah,
It was
and
just business.
they didn't go over budget or whatever,
No,
yeah.
but they
Kurosawa managed to.
Yeah, he was a
he
little
burned
different.
things down, and stuff.
Sure.
Have you ever seen Life of Oharu about
No.
Mizoguchi? It's one of
think
his
so.
most fabulous, and there's a scene in it it's the most heartbreaking and fabulous thing I've ever seen in my life, where this woman has her son taken away from her because she's a concubine, and the son grows up to be the lead prince in this, and she wants to see him. And they said, no, you're not allowed to even look at him. And she manages to get in, and she sees him at a distance. It's her son. And she hasn't seen since he was born. And the way the Mizoguchi, his great skill, one of the, I'm not a filmmaker, obviously, the moving camera was, the moving shot was his masterpiece. And everybody learned from him, apparently. She gets up and then on her knees and she's moving and moving and moving to follow and stare at her son. And this shot, it's heartbreaking masterpiece.
Right.
And all it is the camera moving in the right place and the right actress. And at the heart of it is the emotion of, I need to see my son. It'll be the last time I see him.
Damn.
So I think the Mizoguchi's up there too with Ozu.
Okay, I gotta dig back into that. I've said since I graduated, I'm gonna.
You got to go back to it.
I know, but I have
it's
to.
all available, and not all of it's on the Criterion channel, which I get a lot of use out of.
Okay.
And I have to say that some of the new Chinese directors, there's a fabulous movie called Long Day's Journey into Night. It's by Li Bai.
Okay.
He's a mainland Chinese guy. It is one of the greatest masterpieces in art that I have ever seen in my life. He has one. What do you call it when you never one shot?
Like a one take or a long take, basically, or
1 hour.
Yeah,
it's
oneer.
1 hour.
Whoa.
And nobody else is. And there's no cut. There's nothing in it. And I've watched it over and over again.
Right.
And it's available on the Criterion, so
Okay.
I don't have to pay for it every time I watch it, But it is a staggering work of art. Wow. And to be produced in China. It won every award when it went to Europe and so on. So he's gotten some renown from it. And it's not political.
Okay.
So that it's not censored in any way. But
nice.
It's if you ever have a chance, and it's called Long Jay's Journey into Night, but it has nothing to do with the O'Neill play. It's just a mistranslation from the Chinese. So, and then of course there's I just all of and I also got introduced to Carway Wong by Bill, and that's his greatest gift next to Ozu.
Okay.
Because Mood for Love is just a staggering masterpiece, and then there are all the others, and he's recut them, and they're all being redigitized, and so they're released on the Criterion. So I've been rewatching them, and I just watch some of his things over and over again. He's such a poet.
One, yeah. What was the other one?
Chungking Express.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of the one.
And and it's just as great a movie, I think, but Mood for Love is just special, There's Chungking Express has got some scenes into it, and every now and then I'll say to Louise, come with me, and we'll go and watch the last scene in Chungking Express. And it's just this phenomenal scene. I can't even explain what it is about it. And his use of music.
Yeah, American music.
And in this case, there's a song a pop song from England. I don't even know how he would have even known about it. It's so perfect for the ending of this movie that it just breaks your heart that somebody can get it right. It's all in the art. Eh?
It's all, like you say, totally.
I mean, you can go out and shoot a bunch of stuff and just jam it together, But
right, I've done that as well. But there is, when you hit it, but man, that's 1 in a million sometimes to make something that just hits everybody. Or hits.
I've seen a lot of movies and nothing ends the way that is. So for me,
right.
I mean, also, Mood for Love ends in a beautiful way, and apparently he changed it at the last minute, and it has always been perfect to me, where he puts the secret, he rubs the secret that he's in love with this woman, and he puts it in a hole, and he fills it. It's an ancient kind of legend that's how you bury a lost love. And then this cello music comes in. I'm sorry, I'm talking about movies. No, that's all. That's Bill Baird's fault.
Let's blame Bill.
Let's blame Bill.
But I guess I would say, learning from Bill, he was kind of like, he's this gruff kind. He's still like a very masculine.
Yeah, he is.
But he made it okay to be masculine, but also to like give a shit about art and to talk poetically. That clicked for me.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I really agree. Yeah, he's a special guy. Yeah.
Right on. Well, I'm glad to hear he's still teaching and still doing all right.
I think he's coming to the end.
Okay.
I don't know how that's going to go for him, but
okay.
You know how they are. They can still hang around and come back and give a talk and
for sure.
Whatever.
Hey, I guess one of my regrets was he said when I graduated in 13, come back and just hang out and take a class, but I should have.
Yeah.
But
that's okay. But it's hard.
There's reasons, but yeah.
But you know what? You can do your own class. He gave you, and I've never taken a class in film studies other than talking to Bill, but I can explore, and I immediately can have a reaction to things and then really get engrossed in it.
For sure.
And it's so fulfilling.
I really think, without overstating it, film as a medium to me is the most one-to-one realistic with life, or it can be. Would you?
I don't know. Reading words is pretty close.
Sure.
But certainly, I don't know, listening to music is pretty close. But film, it's in this real time, and you're right, there's a kind of... when I talk about education, how you learn nothing at school, film is the great art form that was created in the 20th century.
Right.
All the other ones basically existed before, unless there's digital things I don't know about. And they never mentioned it. They never did anything. And it's so fulfilling to people's lives. Any level you want to go. And, I can't get my granddaughter, who's only 11, interested in Ozu. It would pour her out of her skull, But Harry Potter,
Sure.
And it's powerful for her. She reads the books too, though.
Good.
And so I think that there's an immediacy to it. I just think, unfortunately, in my opinion, that there's just far too few great movies made right now for us to really grip us that I got to get to the theater too.
Yeah,
I think Wes Anderson's got a new movie that might only come out in the movie theaters, and Louise and I will go and see it if that's the only place we can see it.
Right? Yeah, he's one of the greats working today, right?
Yeah, and I love his animations. Isle of Dogs is just precious.
Isle of Dogs. I never did see that one.
Oh, just rent it. It's $5 on it. I mean, it's just so humorous, and The Fabulous Mr. Fox is almost as good. But anyway,
the last one of his I remember was the one with Ralph Fiennes and the
Budapest Hotel, the Grand Budapest Hotel. Yeah,
which may as well have been a cartoon, right?
That's true.
The way
You're
it was
right.
Shot and
production
design.
He's a perfectionist, right?
Right.
You could see it in him that he doesn't cut. He's not Disney. He doesn't cut these corners and get sentimentalized.
No.
Everything is worked out, and he's got great actors reading. I listen to them reading, are they doing that? Gotta have to do that. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hey, you're going to read this. You're going to read your book.
I hope.
Well,
unless I fail at it.
I don't know. They're bringing the booth here. I think it's
it's on. You can't take Jim to the booth, but you can bring the booth to Jim. I know.
You would maybe... I guess I thought you wanted some technical, technology info, but that's all looked after, so now you just want to...
Yeah, how to approach it.
Sure.
And what are some of the, if you like, tricks that people who do this for a living might do? I mean, when I listen, I'm not aware of the guy reading or the woman reading the book. I don't necessarily like Juliet Stevenson is a well-known actress, and I've seen her in a million things, and now she's reading, I'm listening to her in To the Lighthouse, and I think, it still bothers me a bit. I know who she is, but Virginia Woolf can't read her book, right? So, but she does it brilliantly because she's such a great actress, I
Right.
guess, And now fiction is different from nonfiction.
True.
Because it's got characters.
Right.
Right. And the great long book that I read, listened to completely, Proust's À la recherche de temps perdu, was read by a British guy. But he would break into a Cockney accent when he did lower class, and that for us, that just destroys my concentration.
Yeah.
For the Brits, they think that a lower class French girl would speak like a Cockney, and so he used it, practically ruined it for me. But
Right.
I mean, other than that, he read it fairly brilliantly. You
Okay.
know? So that's something that bothered
That's
me.
interesting. How do you plan to do yours? Just the same voice the whole time?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Okay.
Now I have people say other things, and I think if I can just give them a little bit of emphasis or whatever,
Right. To make it.
And I have to ask her. I don't know. When I've got quotes around things, do I say quote? She said quote, and then unquote,
That's a
or
great question.
Probably
Probably not. I would think.
maybe change your voice a little bit.
Yeah.
As Nietzsche said.
Right. It's all in the
Without music, life is a waste.
Yeah.
Or did Jim say that?
I agree. I don't know.
You know what? I thought if I don't say quote, maybe they'll think I said it. And
Right.
think I'm a better writer.
Right. You come off as a genius.
Yeah.
I guess just take your time would be all I'd say, and
Yeah.
don't be afraid to do 20 takes on a chapter.
Okay, don't be afraid of the takes. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
and
good. Yeah.
I would say stand up, right? So and I don't know if you know anything about singing, and I don't pretend to, but it's from below the lungs.
I'm not good at that, so that's something I really have to
Right.
be careful. I read in bed to Pride and Practice, and I think I'm running out of breath. Well, no wonder, because I'm
Right,
not getting a full. Then my lungs aren't full, right?
Right. It's actually, to me, it'd be very difficult because you'd have to know the material pretty well and kind of see where you're going down the road.
Yeah. I thought what I might do. I'm not sure what form I'm going to be able. It's all in PDF at this stage, and I can't really. I thought I might mark it up because I play classical guitar. I would do phrasing.
That's a good idea.
And do these arches.
Yeah.
And then so I know if I see that arc, I need the breath, and then it goes like this and then this. So
I worked with an actor once who I watched him mark up his script because he knew it was going to be like a voiceover.
Yes.
Over a montage, and I don't think that's genius.
Oh, so he marked it up in that way, where he was going to phrase it, and pause and so on.
Right.
Yeah. Because sometimes I even rewrite. Think that sentence is too long. I'll run out of breath, so I break it into two. So and then taking breaths is a bit. I guess you don't want to make that too obvious. I never hear them taking breaths when they're the professional readers. So
yeah, I wonder how that works. Like, are they? Because they're not going to cut out every breath.
No.
So you almost have to.
They must have maybe
a button. I don't know. Yeah, if you have to back off the mic.
Yeah, to take the breath in. Yeah. Well, she'll probably tell me that.
I'm sure they'll give you some. I've really been just screwing around with just this recorder and these two mics, playing guitar and singing, and I realized, okay, I really can't sing, but but also the mic is an instrument just the same as anything else.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Like I don't even know. Yeah. It has a pattern, right? Like a range that it can see.
Oh, okay.
But even then, I can then go into the post production and tweak.
and jig it around.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And it's.
Why do you think you can't sing?
I guess it was because I never made the effort to listen, and now that I'm listening, I can hear, and it's got to come, like I said, from the diaphragm up. You really
I see. Okay.
The throat is a muscle that you got to work, and then the mouth and the nose play into the resonance of the sound. It's
a wonderful skill, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah.
It's one I'd love to.
My granddaughter's coming along.
Nice.
We went in to put her on the merry-go-round at the Christmas fair.
Okay.
And they were playing. Michael Bublé was singing Jingle Bells, and she said, "Oh no, not Jingle Bells!" I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Every class in our school had to sing it, and I had to play the xylophone to every one of them because nobody else can play it." And I said, "How does it go?" And she sang all five verses for me.
Wow.
And never skipped, and I've got a pretty good ear, and it was in tune, just singing like that. So I think she likes to perform. And, I put her in a drama class a couple of years ago, and she did so well on stage that she was directing everybody, giving them their lines and telling them. So I think she's got a mind for it,
Right.
But I don't know. Several of my friends, two in particular, wanted above all to be actors.
Okay.
And I could see the first time I saw them that there's, do you call it self-consciousness, or
Sure.
do you call it a woodenness, or just get something wrong? I don't know about it, and neither one of them succeeded, and that's all they wanted to do.
Damn.
Was to be actors, and well, my one friend, he did get to act in Paul Gross's TV show, and I could still see him kind of not acting very well, and it was too bad because in person he was the funniest guy I ever met in my life, and he would tell stories and he'd joke and everything, and then he'd act,
And then he would act.
Yeah.
He wouldn't just.
That's what I thought about it anyway.
Yeah.
So I hope I don't have to do too much acting because I have no experience at it.
No. Well, it'll be an interesting. I hope to at least hear from you after the experience.
I will. I'll let you know
for sure.
Yeah.
Do you? It's funny you mentioned about your granddaughter who you think has an ear for. Do you think that's innate? Like that's because I don't believe I personally can hear.
I think it can be developed.
Okay.
And there's a huge controversy. One of my best friends she was a Chinese tennis pro, and she came here and she was training me, and she's Canada's top-ranked female coach right now.
Okay.
And she says, in tennis, there's no such thing as talent. And I said, what do you mean there's no such thing as talent? You see, and she says, I would never choose somebody because I thought they had talent.
Wow.
I said, what do you look for? She says, I only look for one thing. Can they listen?
Huh.
And it's probably the same with music, right? Learn to listen, and you have that. Because you say, well, that person's a great singer. They're talented.
Right.
But and there's been some research, apparently, according to my friend, in various fields about this.
Okay.
About why do people excel at certain things. And those of us who can't do it think, well, I don't have the talent.
Right.
But like you say, maybe they didn't learn to listen or what. And sometimes we're not exposed to a lot of music in our schools,
That's true.
And so that's too bad in my opinion. I think you should be exposed to all kinds of music, and now kids are my granddaughter's only exposed to popular music, and she will never listen to classical music, and I think that, and I wouldn't want her to do that exclusively, but even to listen to jazz and what's going on with that, kind of thing.
That's a workout.
And then you can learn more about music itself, and then before you choose the kind that you're going to do. So
that's a good point.
She says, you watch The Voice, and no, I'm not you need a course in popular culture, Grandpa. She tells me, she's always telling me off,
That's hilarious. But also you say like she's exposed only to popular music, which is kind of a hellscape in a lot of ways. It's not
these days in particular, I think,
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the quality of the music, but it's the values that are in the music.
Is it? I don't know enough about it for
my
that.
personal, like just.
Yeah.
But I've even maybe you could weigh in on this. Like I even think like I listened to a lot of blues music when I was younger.
Yeah, me too.
Then I thought, what was I beating into my psyche for years? Like because the blues is the music of
black people
for sure.
Yeah, I know.
And always it was a lost love.
Yes, it was. So is country music.
For sure.
It's nothing but lost love. Yeah.
Right. So all of that, and even like so, and then is there something to that? You think if you
it's a one-note thing,
Right.
I was brought up on Hank Williams, and I thought in many ways he was a genius, but it was just your cheating heart and all that sort of stuff, Whereas if you listen to one opera, there'll be 100 emotions.
Right.
From anger and revenge and deep love and resentment, and that's the kind of the broadening that I wish that would happen more, not necessarily like one and to exclusion to the other, I'm a great Leonard Cohen fan, for example, and I still listen to his music, and I think he's a great poet. And so I feel that if that's popular music, then I listen to it, and I find some of his songs quite moving, actually.
Yeah, he was a great, wasn't he? Like he was one of the great Canadians.
Yes.
Right? Period.
Yes.
As a writer and
there's a creative Canadian that's not like he's not Bob Dylan. He's not. He's Leonard Cohen from Montreal. He's a Montreal Jew. And
totally.
he was a Canadian. And I have a quote from him in my book about. I don't know what it is to be Canadian, but I just think of it as, well, we're not Americans. So, and that's one way to look at it, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I think that's, he was a great poet. I love the story about Bob Dylan saying to him, how did you write that song, Hallelujah? I mean, it's a great song. How did you write that? He said, well, it took me 4 months. And Dylan said, I never spend more than 5 minutes on a song. So I'm not a great fan of Bob Dylan's, and because I think that he's, if anybody should have won the Nobel Prize, it should have been Leonard Cohen.
Yep.
That's a slight Canadian resentment, I guess.
No, I agree with that. I there's moments in Dylan's career that I really
I
love.
too, and some of his songs are great.
Yeah,
I know.
He's a genius in his own way, but also some of it was
crap.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I remember I saw it talking to Joan Baez, and the way he treated her, you can't really forgive him, but he said, "What does that mean, blowing in the wind?" No, they just think it means something. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
It's bullshit. It's basically what he said, but they like it.
Yeah,
they think it means something.
But that is okay. I think that's what pop music is it just kind of lays out something very simple, and you project onto it.
That's right. Yeah. So, do you listen to rap? I mean, I have no ear for it, so I don't know anything about it. But it seems to be the driving force right now, does it?
Yeah, especially if you want to talk about. Well, I find like the percussion work.
Oh yeah,
so
the rhythmic part of it
for sure. Yeah. But it is also too like where the poets, I suppose, of my generation and younger, that's where they reside.
Okay.
So I think maybe it gets it's a legitimate art form.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even a guy like Kanye West, his albums now have become where he's more of like a producer or a director, and there's all these voices and all these soundscapes. So it's.
What about Drake?
I don't have much of an ear for Drake. I would say, there's something about him that.
He has a fancy house in Toronto. He must do okay.
Oh, he does very well. I'm sure he's a multi. Yeah, but
I've never heard him. So.
Oh no, I guess it's. He always sounds one note to me. It's just this very kind of monotone.
That's what a lot of rap sounds like to me.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Fair enough.
I really don't know. So anyway, here we are talking about all of the arts.
Talking about all the arts.
Yeah.
So. Well, I'm blown away by this record collection of yours. Anyway,
there's 1 or 2 pop and 3 or 4 jazz, and all the rest of it's classical.
Okay.
I've digitized all of those. I don't know what to do with them now.
Oh wow!
And I've put them on my server, and I can access them through various programs. Mm-hmm. Plus, I'm into streaming now.
Okay.
And there's a classical only feed from Germany called Adagio, and I'm really enjoying it.
Okay.
So I can get new releases without, it's just a monthly fee of $9 or $10 or something like that. So
nice.
And sounds improved if you've got the right equipment.
Yeah.
It's pretty good sound.
Okay. So you listen to headphones, or you have a stereo system?
This is my stereo system, and I've got a tube amp in there. It's handmade in France. Those are Danish speakers that cost me 10 grand. So it's good. It's good stuff. But my pride and joy is I have a pair of $6,000 headphones. Okay. They're handmade in France.
Nice.
And they are exquisite and very comfortable and fabulous sounding, especially for my older ears.
Sure. So would you say you're an audiophile, I guess?
Yeah. Sort of. Yeah. Bill is too, of course. But I've got other buddies who spend. One guy I know spent $20,000 on a turntable. So I said, the scratches are going to sound great on that thing. I understand the obsession with it, but I just couldn't not get the records wrecked, dirty and scratched, and all the rest of it. So digital sound is fine to me.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting, because you tell me, do you listen to mostly classical?
Oh,
like exclusively?
Yeah, except for Leonard Cohen a bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. There's a richness and a depth and a range there, right?
Yeah.
So no matter what you're doing, you know the right sort of symphony or opera to listen to? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of it off by heart. So it's... and I'm getting to the point where... And unfortunately, I'm kind of restricting what I listen to rather than it was a part of my life, especially when I knew Bill. I want to know that. I want, what else did Barry write or whatever. And then I got into Wagner and other things. And now I'm kind of, I'm even looking at certain composers that I love, like Bach, and I'm listening to fewer and fewer of his pieces.
Interesting.
And maybe getting in more depth to them. Or I don't know. So
that's fascinating. You think, I don't know.
Aging.
Would you think the opposite? Or aging, what you like?
I don't know.
That's neat.
I think that somehow, we've talked a lot. What are your standards? What do you think is really good? And then once I know that there's nothing ever been written that approaches the Goldberg Variations as solo piano, why would I listen to anything else? So
Sure.
I'm a little bit small-minded in that way, and then I always return to it. And I'll be listening to something else and say, why am I wasting my time on that? I could be listening to this, you know.
Interesting.
But the streaming is helpful to me.
Okay.
Because then I can, try that. Oh, then it'll catch my ear, and I can. But it's another thing to go out and buy CDs. You know, you're pretty specific what you want, and whereas it's a little better with the streaming. You can listen to a variety of things. So
For sure, streaming has been. I mean, as I understand it, it's totally killed like musicians' revenue.
Yeah,
but
I know.
As a consumer, it's open. Like do you use Spotify too, or
no? I don't use Spotify. Yeah,
you just use this other service. You're talking about?
Just a strictly classical service.
Okay,
yeah, it's my taste. Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Spotify though has showed me things that I like.
Yeah, world music and so on.
Sure, world.
Yeah,
or even yeah. Exactly right. Things that I just never would have ever.
Yeah, I should get more into that. Yeah, it's
if you
I
want.
hear Japanese drumming and I just think, well, why don't I listen to this? What's going on? This
totally.
is fabulous music, you know.
Totally.
And I like Indian music. I went to see Ravi Shankar live.
Oh,
and
nice.
I think, and the complexity of it, and you know, and the soundscape that they create. So that's true. I should open my mind again. I'm sure of it. You know,
Well,
you know,
whatever. Or there's that.
So long as I don't have to watch Harry Potter. Okay. You know?
Okay, no.
Yeah.
Although Harry Potter was important in some ways, right? It taught kids something, didn't it?
Like what? You know?
The argument I've heard is that, well, no, it's really I can't even. It's a recycled.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah.
You're not a fan of it. Not fond of it.
No, it was no, it just never interested me. And my granddaughter asked me, she loves Star Wars, and she said, "Do you love it?" And I'm honest with her. No, it's just this simplistic good and evil,
Right.
you know. And there's no complexity to it. There's no characters that would be of any interest to me.
Right.
And so, no, Grandpa, honestly, you know. Yeah.
Maybe Harry Potter. The lesson there is that he's got that scar. He's got the touch of evil in him. He's got that seed of darkness in him.
I should ask my granddaughter
See what
about
she
that.
thinks.
She'll probably understand that.
Right.
Yeah, that adds depth to it, doesn't it?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, I'm sure they.
But Luke Skywalker was just a goody-goody. I mean, come on.
Totally. Oh man,
Yeah.
I've actually got a friend who is like militantly against Disney and sort of the narratives that
I
they put out.
understand that.
And I hadn't thought much about it. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some corrupt stuff going on there.
There is, and they're cutting all kinds of corners into quality and so on. I mean, if you read about Wes Anderson and how he makes his animations,
Right.
it's art,
Right.
compared to what Disney does, because they're bottom line driven. Right?
Bottom line driven.
Yeah.
Right.
A guy like Wes Anderson, he's an independent, and he gets support from his actors and so on. And
Right.
so he makes his works will last.
Right.
I think anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, just to maybe kind of let us down gently, if we
Yeah.
could circle back to the encyclopedia, and you were just saying bottom line driven. I guess how much pressure was there on you in those days to make good on the money that was given to you, and how much freedom did you have?
I had total freedom. I never felt that it was my responsibility, and it needed to be marketed, and it really was well marketed. When we got into digital, and it was long past when Hertig was in charge of this, I still remember one day this young woman came into my office, and she just arrived here from France and was going to U of A. And she said, "I love your encyclopedia and what you're doing digitally, but you haven't got a clue about how to market it." And so she wrote up this plan. I hired her, and she did this brilliant job of presenting it to schools and getting, we got school kids together all over Canada, gathering and under a topic like democracy or whatever, and told them about the online encyclopedia and its support for all of that. And so I never worried about that. I worried about the excellence of it, the quality of it, and the appeal of it, you know, and the schedules.
Sure.
So those were things I let other people worry about.
That's a beautiful experience to not have to worry about marketing, because now as a creative, it's you.
My wife said
I
was never actually. I mean, right now I get irritated a lot, but she said during the encyclopedia she never saw me worry, but it wasn't going to get done, or that it was going to go wrong, or you know, I guess I just didn't waste energy on that, and maybe that was one of the qualities that got me through it, you know.
Totally that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, James, for having me and for
Oh,
sharing
it's been
all these
so
stories.
much fun talking to you, Patrick.
It's been a blast. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading or listening to your memoir, and hopefully we can get together some other time in the
That
future.
would be fabulous.
Beautiful. All right.
Great.
Thank you for watching, folks. Thank you for listening to the North Bank Media Podcast. If you enjoy this conversation, please subscribe on YouTube and give us a like. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe as well and leave a 5-star review.